So thank you very much, Sia, as well as Mr. Sai for this. And of course, I'm also always happy to share this platform with my dear friend, the Ambassador Bishop Mohan Kumar, who always comes up with ideas which can be developed further and taken to logical end. But he always is something who's always thinking ahead of his time and thinking in the right perspective. So thank you very much for this great opportunity. Very interestingly, CI is focusing on this issue of together, collaborations. This is very worrying times for all, but particularly for India. If you look at it, our aspiration of $5 trillion economy to begin with, and then subsequently doubling it to $10 trillion, depends on so many important factors. Firstly, let us go back to this fundamental issue. Why do you need $5 or $10 trillion? Of course, it's a natural progression. The companies like what Vishesai was handling would like to increase their top line over long, immediately doubling in few years. That's a corporate goal. So as a country, our goal has to increase overall GDP for simple reason of increasing per capita income. Per capita income is really a very arithmetical exercise that you divide the total GDP by number of people and you get per capita income. But not always that shows the reality, because if everybody doesn't get the desired result of that growth, there will be social as well as economic disparities. But even to address those disparities, you need higher growth. Because if you don't have higher GDP, how will you get tax GDP ratio? How will you get incomes to the governments which can be apportioned into addressing this inequality issue? So having a high GDP growth is a very important imperative and a priority for India. So doubling from 3 trillion now to 6 to 12, you can put it like that, because when we started working as Commerce and Industry Minister, 5 trillion, our GDP is to be 2.5 trillion, now it is 2.9, and maybe we should try to think differently, but let us take $5 or $10 trillion movement. In that, so we agree that we need it. The question is, can we go to 5 trillion or 10 trillion, or to forget 10 now, because today is a little recessionary times. Let's take about 5. Can we reach that level without collaboration? Can we ever get to that without building bridges? Can we cross the river, and that too such a turbulent river now, without having a very safe, reliable bridge? And now everybody will agree that it is inconceivable, impossible, that without collaboration, without exploring markets outside India, we can ever achieve that growth. Only by domestic demand that will fuel it. Again, it's very important that unless you have a strong, vibrant domestic economy, you can never have a competitive integration into global economy. So you need strong domestic economy. If you don't have strong companies, you cannot export. If Ashok Leyland cannot sell products in India, it cannot sell it globally. So Ashok Leyland will firstly focus, I'm just saying Ashok Leyland, Vishesai has been here, but I'm just giving illustrative, there's nothing. But I'm just saying, so first what will Vishesai, the CEO job would be to ensure that he first captures the domestic market adequately, develop very solid base, and then expand. So India as a whole country also will have the same strategy and should have a strategy that have a strong domestic economy so that we can venture into the global markets very effectively. Now that again is a question which can very easily be answered. Can we have strong domestic economy without collaborations with global players? Now we have talked about value chains. What is a fundamental principle of a value chain? Like when you run an automobile company, an automobile incidentally is more than half of India's manufactured GDP. So it's a very important segment, very important sector. Can you assemble a vehicle or even a commercial vehicle on your shop floor unless you have a supply chain? And a supply chain, most of it now is in India, could be global. So just imagine for India to be a hub of automobiles, which is a backbone of India's manufacturing sector today, we need a supply chain that's part of collaboration. And that supply chains many times, or even sometimes for sure, will go outside of India. So just imagine if we want to be very strong domestic economy so that we eventually become very strong globally, we must have a strong some core competencies in certain manufacturing. That core competencies in manufacturing can come only when we want to sell that end product globally. You must have an ability to make that globally acceptable product in India in a manner that all components that go into it are of the best quality. Not always it will be possible that you can make it in India. Not always. Over a period of time, yes, it will be. But for the time being, in a medium term, we may have to rely on it. So therefore, the supply chain presupposes that we want to be part of a supply chain, but still it's a chain. That means not 100% will be made here, but part of that will be made somewhere else. And therefore, the collaborative part of it, which is the part of today's discussion, will play a key role. So we may have to sometimes collaborate with raw material suppliers. Sometimes we'll have to collaborate with intermediaries in case of chemicals and others. Sometimes we'll have to collaborate with component manufacturers like in case of automobiles. And then only we can make that end product which we can sell it globally. Or it's possible that we can go the backward side. That we will become only component suppliers like we are doing in auto component in a big way. Or we can do it in formulations wherein we are importing bulk drugs and make formulations here. So ultimately, the key component of India becoming a part of a global supply chain will largely depend upon collaboration, either backward ended or forward ended. But it is undeniable fact that we cannot do it unless we have both ends of our markets open. That means if we want export to be captured and we want investment to come into India, it has to be open for an investor to feel comfortable. Like for example, let us take company in India wants to go and invest in Sri Lanka because Sri Lanka also has a good domestic market. They don't manufacture automobiles. We go there and we tell Sri Lanka that Sri Lanka would say we'll allow only export, not import. Can you ever manufacture anything in Sri Lanka like this? So what will expect Indian investor going out and investing would expect that foreign market also to be opened both ways. We should allow to export so that Sri Lanka benefits from Sri Lankan shores, but also allow something to be imported in Sri Lanka. So I think we'll have to think about collaborations of different kinds in this today's world. I take on the point of Ambassador, my dear friend, who mentioned about industrial policy. I'm not getting policy right now because it will expand the subject to little more. But here in this context of supply chains, industrial policy will play a key role. We, in fact, I thank CII. We worked with CII very closely as Commerce and Industry Minister, and I had prepared a vision for $5 trillion economy. 20% of that trillion dollar, will come from manufacturing or rather industry, not manufacturing alone. Industry, little broader spectrum than manufacturing. 20%, that's trillion dollar. And taking it from 16% today. So 4% jump is not small, 24% more than what it is today. And to do that, we are prepared completely. And to supplement it, we had prepared a draft industrial policy. As you know, we had only two industrial policies in the past before us. 1956, which was a resolution incidentally. And second was 1991 or 92, around that time, when Narasimha Rao actually thought about opening the economy completely, delicensed and everything, and thought about his new industrial policy. So we have never had too many. Actually, The current one, which already was negotiated with stakeholders, discussed with all possible entities in India, put on the website, it was almost ready. I think while we do it now, it will coincide with this today's changing world in which collaboration and partnership, today's subject discussion, will be the most critical part of our industrial growth. At a time when G20 will be hosting in India in 2022, 2 years from now. This said Saudi, last year was Japan, next year will be Italy, and 2022 will be India. Hopefully, I hope by then the pandemic will be history. It will be discussed not in hospitals anymore or treated in hospitals anymore. At best, it will be discussed in universities as something as a past phenomena. I hope so. By 2022, it should happen. But then, even when it's still a live issue in hospitals, people are dying, people are being treated on a very large scale, economy becomes a very important issue. Because economy has taken a toll even before the body count started. So people are dying, but economy is also dead even before that globally. US has contracted, almost all countries are contracted. So what in that situation, unless we collaborate, at least among G20 countries, but also expanding that partnership into other countries, we will not be able to come out of this economic challenge. We are already into a big ditch. When GDP contracts, we have to expand only to come to the previous level. So just imagine, we are talking about growth and we had a phenomenal growth till 2008, 30 years of almost unhindered growth in the global economy. Today we are seeing that we contract, so we go down and then we have to make extra effort to just come to the previous level. So that's not growth. We are just getting the status quo ante, the situation that prevailed before. So to get that, collaboration will be extremely necessary. So economic issues for G20 and under G20 leadership all over the world will be a very, very important preoccupation of the global community for the next several years. Because as I said, first come out of the ditch, then expand. So maybe in another 7-8 years minimum, we'll have to focus on economic development globally. And to do that, if countries become inward looking, that much more time will be taken, that much less growth will happen than it would have happened if we were open economy. And when we say open, there is nobody saying that you get into blind ownership. When you play flush, you start playing blindly without opening the cards. I'm not saying that. Play it like a rummy player. You open the card, know what you have holding in your hands, and then play it properly. But when you are doing all this, you must keep the trade policy and industrial policy now together. Again, I'm not getting into the expanded part, but it will have to be a very important issue. The second collaboration in the world now will have to happen on a much larger scale, will be also on the level of healthcare. Should we not think about, because just imagine that whether I am dark, black, brown or white, I am equally affected. Now, incidentally, it's a different issue that almost 86% of the deaths and 90% of infections are in the G20 countries. I don't know whether the link between economy anyway, that's a different issue. But so therefore, if each one of us are going to be affected equally, and in fact, as it is proved that G20 is affected more than rest of the world, should we not have collaboration to deal with health issues? The time when we are thinking about intellectual property regime for pharmaceuticals, there were TRIPS. And in that we are thinking that some of the diseases like malaria and others are no longer the problem of developed world. This is something to do with developing countries. They don't have proper sanitation, they don't have proper care system, so let them deal with it. We have to invest our billions of dollars into developing a molecule to deal with that. But today, the world is thinking of collaboration, and we realize that without collaboration, we cannot even deal with pandemic. So now we'll have to have a big collaboration on global scale, integrated to deal with healthcare issues. We'll have to identify certain critical advantages that some countries enjoy. Like for example, India is very good in vaccines. We are very good in generics. So we should be used as a resource center for the world. That will produce something as we have done even during the pandemic, that we supplied so many critical medicines to whole world, including US and Europe. In fact, I was also receiving calls from my friends from G20 that please give us. So I had to pass on the request to Honorable Prime Minister, and he acted on it and he made it. But whole world needed the medicine from India. I'm not trying to very pride. I'm not trying to say that we are great because of this. I'm not saying that India is. I'm just saying India has that capability, proven capability. So in vaccines, a company called Serum Institute, which doesn't even look like a company, run by Mr. Poonawalla, is one of the top world-class institute, world-class company. So what it means is that on healthcare, we'll have to have a collaboration of a different kind. Rather than just worried about IPRs on some matters, our IPRs are necessary. I'm absolutely for IPRs. I'm for regarding, respecting them, following them. And I've done that as a Commerce Industry Minister. We had a huge program to implement the IPR regime. But I'm saying take critical healthcare aspects. And on that, if you can deal preventively, not to allow another pandemic to come, will it not help the global community? So collaboration on that will be extremely important. And we'll have to work on that. The third pillar of collaboration on large scale would be on social issues. When you say social issues, it means social inequality globally, whether it is issues related to migration, whether it are issues related, of course, I should not bring it in that basket, but can I put it there in that basket itself? Climate change, issues like that. Let us have collaboration to work on that. See, I fully appreciate and acknowledge and respect the fact that every country's sovereign right is to pursue their own domestic interest. There is a national interest they must protect first, then only they can become internationalist. Point completely well taken, has to be accepted. But sometimes you have to also introspect to see whether my national interest is protected better by becoming a little more international. And that is true for healthcare, for social issues. Because if you don't do that, you are putting your own population to unimaginable risk. US would, as their own estimate, would have more than 100,000 deaths. Could you ever imagine that this could happen? The UK would have probably the largest number of deaths in Europe. So just imagine, this is a challenge which they have to face. They are at the receiving end of it, but the starting point may be somewhere else. So why not we have a collaboration to deal with these issues on a global scale? And therefore, I think one of the key element of the new evolution to the world new order will paradoxically has to be more collaboration, more understanding each other than ever before. And as Ambassador pointed out, the weaknesses of this global structure was coming to fore even before this pandemic started. There was a threat to multilateral institutions in a big way. Just imagine, you can obviously look at all these institutions more closely and evaluate them more scientifically, properly, and therefore we should make them better. But we need these institutions more than any other time in the past. The integration has happened of a scale which is unimaginable. We can close the borders for refugees. We can prevent and put certain barriers for trade. But integration is much beyond that. Whether it is through sea, whether it is to air, whether it is to land, we have already been integrated in a big way. We try to meet each other on many occasions. So entire world tourism depends on tourists going from one country to another. So many countries' economies will collapse if there is no tourism. So we can think about protectionism, but we should not overlook the fact that we are already integrated to an extent that it is virtually irreversible. In that context, collaboration will play a role. When you ask me that question, whether FTAs or whether other forms, the first form of trade would be there should be a global trade regulator. That's WTO. And in this context, where each country's aspiration to grow would be more and more because every country, even those countries who have got $50,000 capita income, they also would like to grow. Nobody is satisfied only $50,000 anymore. They also want to increase, expand. So in that situation, agreements with countries and blocs will be very critical. We'll have to do that to fulfill these aspirations. And only looking at from India's perspective, India has much at stake in the global trading order. We must have, therefore, multilateral engagement with countries as well as bilateral engagement. We cannot grow to the extent that we want to grow unless we have more integration to the global market. That's our own interest. Ask your companies. All companies in India would like to expand their markets more, and they will not be happy only to expanding in India. For a simple reason is that there will be limitation to their growth trajectory. And therefore, if you want to do that, then we'll have to have engagement with the world. Which country will agree with you to have an FTA with you unless we have larger engagement? And therefore, we'll have to work on these complex issues through partnership and collaboration. That should be the catchword for tomorrow. That is what should be the guiding principle for the future growth trajectory of the world and India to begin with. So I think you had given me limited time. I'm looking at my watch. So I would stop here. Maybe during next few minutes of interactive session, we could focus on some of the issues more. But once again, thank CII for this opportunity. And I'm really happy that my dear friend, who is always with me in many forums like this, Ambassador. So we'll continue to work together and make India's presidency of G20 a remarkable presidency under G20 history, under leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who has chosen this as the 75th anniversary of India's independence. And that hallmark of that would be India would also be engaging with the rest of the world more in the years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. As usual, your clarity of thought has always been very impressive. I recall my interaction when you had the draft industrial policy. I think it is an outstanding document. We will have quite a few questions coming up from the participants, but before I pass on to the participants, just one question, sir. You have so eloquently talked about the need for collaboration. And at the same time, when everybody feels that there is a need for countries to come together to fight the future challenges of the 21st century, this is the very time when we are really seeing trade wars between US and China. This is the very time that we see multilateral institution, rule-based trading institution like WTO at its weakest moment. And this is the very time when we see perhaps the G20 not doing adequately in response to a challenge like a climate change. So therefore, between the ideological positions that the various countries have and the need for what needs to be done, there seems to be quite a bit of hiatus. So is India's voice a cry in wilderness? And also, equally, if this is the way that we need to be moving forward in terms of more active collaboration, stepping up our engagement with the rest of the world, then how do we interpret the concept of self-reliance as every other country is talking about self-reliance suddenly as it is happening? So how do we reconcile these two? So these are very critical questions. So you might want to share your thoughts on that, and then I will pass this on to the other participants who wish to have raise some questions with you.
Actually, this is a question. It reminds me of the dilemma of a PhD student. Normally, when you start a PhD thesis, I mean, I'm doing two, actually, one in Germany, one in India. So I'm just saying
That's very interesting.
the hypothesis is the starting point, and the hypothesis starts with some sort of a inherent contradiction, and you try to answer that question. But I think that's what leads you to the final dissertation. When you make, you actually address that issue properly. So I think the challenge is life is always full of paradoxes of a kind that I mentioned. But pandemic is not a cause of this contradiction, really. It started much earlier. In fact, the threat to WTO has been visible and has been more tangible in the last few years under constant attack on its leadership, on its structure, on its policies, which was a beginning of this process of challenging multilateralism. And therefore, we have to deal with this very effectively. And I can see, and I'm saying this little genuinely, is that the Prime Minister Modi can play a very key role into this because he shares a very good equation with most of the good global leaders who matter. And that is important because when you want to play a leadership role, people must at least have a confidence in your personality, which Mr. Modi has shares it. So I think we can play a very key role into dealing with this contradiction very effectively. And India has played that even earlier when, of course, now that was the old thing in the NAM days that we played that role. We have played that role even recently to play as a neutral partner with most of our genuine friends, on honest friends with our contradictory interest groups. So I think we should share that. I think on G20, it looks like the only platform because if you look at all the multilateral institutions which have become ineffective, not operating as well, G20 seems to be the only platform in which we can happen. And this will be a good time for us to actually address this when India would be sharing it, rather chairing it in now 1.5 years time from now.
So Unnikrishnan, you had a question.
Minister Sir, Unnikrishnan from Pune, Thermax. You really articulated it so well as to what we need to do going forward and looking at this as an opportunity. And also alluding to the point raised by Ambassador, many Indian companies are now ready to face competition. So we having FTA signed with the developed world is something which we look forward to. Because personal experience of ours is it has taken almost a decade for us to become partners with companies like JGC in Japan, Technip in Italy, Samsung in Korea, where they use the main technology and we become a supplier to them for the major contracts happening at any part of the world. But that luxury of time may not be available. And one of the major challenges that we'll be facing is most of them come with sovereign credit also being extended for projects abroad. We have a major limitation that you are aware of. We discussed it earlier also about the Exim Bank limitations. And that is something which we need to be immediately solving. Second is many of the countries, including some of them who have got trade surplus with India, do have non-tariff barriers which are holding Indian supplies as a part of the global contract. So my request to you is that while you're going to take it up as representing the country for partnership with individual countries in bilateral and multilateral ways, we need to account for a couple of these issues so that whatever is the vision the Prime Minister has got, and Indian industry is looking forward to becoming a global trade partner for G20 countries, this we need to be addressing.
No, I think I fully agree with you. In fact, recently when I was Commerce Minister, I had set up three independent organizations, not a ministry, who will talk to all the stakeholders on their own and then submit a report about what is the stakeholder view on engagement with other countries for a FTA. So that the concerns and the aspirations and the priorities of our stakeholders are properly enshrined into the negotiation. So that otherwise negotiations will be conducted at officer level and people, the stakeholder will be left out. To avoid that eventually and to ensure that it doesn't happen, we actually created this institutionalized mechanism. So in future agreements, I think this is what will happen, is that first would have thought threadbare all the possible consequences of this with industry, because they are either at the receiving end or they are the beneficiary. So let them fully evaluate it properly. Cost benefit analysis is properly done, and then only it can be put into there. So I take your point. Second point is about the non-tariff barriers, which actually I will remember I taken the issue with the Chinese. In fact, our pharmaceutical products, probably China should be importing them more for their own benefit. I remember as a chemicals and fertilizer minister way back in 1999, 21 years ago, I had encouraged our pharma companies to export to Latin America. Because why that idea came to me, with my Brazilian counterpart at that time, he was telling me about a high price of pharmaceutical products. So I said, why don't you import from India? And then I sent my companies who were reluctant to go, but they are now happy that they went and they are doing very big business. So what point is, in non-tariff barriers, I told the Chinese that it is in our interest to import. Incidentally, that 1 year when I pursued with the Chinese, the only time our exports to China increased by more than 30%, and our trade deficit with China went down by more than $10 billion, 11 billion in 1 year. It has never happened. Otherwise, it was always increasing. Trade deficit was increasing. We have never been declining the trade. Because I pursued it very aggressively, particularly this non-tariff barrier. Because I told the Chinese that you can say that Indian companies can come, but your regulators will never allow them to come because they will always raise certain issues. So actually, at my instance, the Commerce Minister had a round table with the regulators and our Indian companies which benefited them and to go there. That's so is the case with soybean and many others. The point I'm saying is, it is always possible to get over the non-tariff barrier with active engagement, because you cannot foresee everything when you sign the agreement. Such type of issues crop up eventually over a period of time. And when they come up, we need a very active engagement of the government to ensure that we help our industry very supportively. And this is what is very necessary. I think we should continue with this process in the years to come.
Thank you, sir. Ambassador Anil Wadhwa, may I invite you to come in with your intervention, please? I think you're muted. Ambassador Anil Wadhwa, I think you have to unmute.
Can you hear?
Yeah.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, sir. It's always a pleasure to listen to you, and I'm so glad that you actually brought out the point about need for collaboration in G20, because that's, as you rightly said, perhaps the only body today which can actually look at all these issues. In fact, what we expected was that perhaps at the initial virtual meeting, we will have some sort of a package which would talk about a fiscal stimulus, talk about supply chains, avoidance of protectionist measures, currency devaluation, which should be avoided this time, and also liquidity in the financial system. But unfortunately, it's got, as Mr. Seshtai said, paralyzed because of the contradiction between United States and China at this point in time. Now, in your opinion, how should one break this logjam? Because, unless we have this kind of a package which would evolve out of the G20, it'll be very difficult to get, the liquidity, the whole global system going again. So what would be a solution to this? How does one do that?
Actually, in fact, there's an ongoing discussion in G20 to get over the economic issues globally. There has been a lot of talk going on. The IMF, the World Bank president, they always keep and give presentation to G20, and they are also actively engaging to it. So is OECD, and I think this is one of the most important priority. And I think G20 is trying to move on that direction, because all countries now realize the interdependence of the economies. That if you want to grow, the US has to grow. That US cannot grow unless the Mexico grows, because so many products will go from US to Mexico. If Mexico wants to grow, they cannot grow unless there is a collaboration with Canada. Though, of course, I'm just mentioning these three countries part of NAFTA, but so is the case with European Union can grow only when they have their own trading partners grow. So I think this is the interdependence, and the trading partners, unless they realize that our Western interest in growth, we cannot really grow. So, for example, somebody who is supplying components to a company, that component company's growth will happen only when their own customer to whom they supply, their revenues go. So this is same as with the global economy, that trading partners growth has to happen. So therefore G20 realizing this need for collaboration is now trying to engage more. Actually, there's a lot of work already going on.
Thank you, sir. Bharat Joshi, would you like to come in?
Thank you, sir. Good evening, Suresh Prabhuji. It's wonderful to see you again. Sir, when quite recently, when you were the Minister for Commerce and Industry, you had established the Department for Logistics. So the G20 in a driving position right now to ensure that connectivity chains do not break, both digital and physical connectivity. So question one is, what can the G20 do to ensure that these chains are not broken? Because if trade is to continue, logistics and connectivity will be required. Question two is, sir, regarding digitization of processes. Now, only under the lockdown, for example, shipping companies for the first time are using electronic BLs, bills of lading. What can the G20 do to ensure? Can we say that, look, let's continue with this beyond the lockdown so we don't lose some of these benefits that have come? Thank you, sir.
Firstly, the seamless logistic movement. That's what you're talking about. Seamlessly, how can you move together? And that's what I was saying earlier. Whether we like it or not, we are integrated. See, we don't realize it. Artificial borders, we stop refugees from coming. That's one part. We can stop trade from entering your markets by putting either non-tariff barriers or actual tariff barriers. That's another part. But beyond all this, there is already integration of a magnitude that is unimaginable. And shipping lines, that's what I was saying. I mentioned about sea, I mentioned about road, and I mentioned about air. This is already there. And therefore, this breaking of it is a temporary phenomena, because this happened in a very unusual times when 97% of the flights were grounded. This is unusual. 97% of the flights were grounded. And many, I don't know how many, have already gone down under. Most of the airlines are either, even Lufthansa was saying that they are doing their best to avoid bankruptcy. One of the top airlines of the world. So that, and in America, airlines have not filed for bankruptcy only because of these huge billions of dollars of support, which part of it went to the airlines. So that is a temporary phenomena. But over a period of time, we'll see that is logistic nobody can disrupt it, because see, what is the purpose of developing a network in own territory which has no connection with outside? For example, let's take in India. Can I say that there are 29 states, now 30 states in India, and therefore I can say that my railway network I can only allow it only within my state. What is the use of that railway network which doesn't go beyond my state? Because if it is not integrated nationally, that the railway network has no meaning. And this was a realization to European Union. And that is not before European Union was formed. That railway network are confined to own border, that has no meaning. So therefore there is a derail. People travel from one end to another. So the logistic chains have to be integrated. That point is absolutely non-negotiable. So I think G20 is very conscious of it, and with this is something. So the digitalization part of it. In fact, I'll just tell you, in India, I launched a program when I was a commerce industry minister. TCS is handling it to digitalize. So that BL, what you talk about, bills of lading, which you require actually for export, or bill of entry when you import something. So this is two-way transaction. Actually, program that is on. TCS is working on it, is completely digitalized our entire international trade operation by integrating all the players, because international trade is not just shipping ministry, it is not just commerce ministry, it is not just finance ministry, it is quite a few entities are involved, and in the ministry itself, so many institutions. Like in finance ministry itself, there will be customs involved, but there will be also DRI involved. There will be so many institutions involved. So we are trying to work on that project. So already that process is on. So you will see that now it was an aberration that you could file a BL digitally, but it will become a reality and inevitable. And there will not be any choice left to people. In fact, I remember that many years ago, as a freight forwarding business of 30 years ago, you needed a clearing and forwarding agents, customs house agent, CHA. Now, what is the job for a CHA? Because you can do that whole transaction that a CHA is to do for you, sitting in your own office and making it happen. But that will happen more and more. So I think please be sure that this is a process which is irreversible.
Thank you, sir. I think we might have just about time for 2 more questions. So can I request Salil Singhal followed by Hari Tyagarajan? Salil, you got to unmute. Okay, we're not getting Salil. Not sure why, but Hari, would you like to come in?
Yes, sir. Thank you. So thank you, Minister, sir, for interacting with CEO today. Sorry.
Shesh, I'm on the line. What happened?
So sorry.
Yes, I'm on the line.
Okay, so would you like to come in first, Singhal, and then we'll have Hari. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Suresh Bhai, it's a pleasure to see you again and hear you and your thoughts as ever the erudite. Question you mentioned very rightly about the need for international collaboration. And indeed, I think when I look at some of the trade wars, I see them more as an opportunity than a threat. Undoubtedly, we need a multilateral or institutions like the WTO to keep the track of the international arrangements. But I think at home, in essence, to be part of the international supply chain, there are 3 very critical requirements. One is that you are in a very competitive environment for manufacture. You have economic strength as a country, and you have the ability of speedy response to international requirements. And I'm afraid that while it will be alluded to an industrial policy to be looked at, I think that bigger challenge in India is to look at the nuts and bolts of how industry performs and works in the phenomenally complicated regulatory environment that is besieging India in every sector. How many of you, for example, know that 58% of a mineral cost is the cost of taxation on the minerals that we extract? You look at getting an approval or permission for a factory with all that we might have done for ease of business. The challenge even of existing factories to work is phenomenal. There is so much of cost. And I see this is manifested so clearly when Indian industry has to clamor, please increase customs duty because the imports are giving us a tough competition. And invariably, there are pressures and counter pressures to seek increasing customs duty, but we are not addressing the problem. Why are we not competitive? Where is it that we are failing in being able to take on the world as far as competitiveness is concerned? With all the resources we have, natural, manpower, brain power, yet we are not able to get competitive. This is something I think we need to address. And I wonder when can we do that? And if we don't do that, ability to become a stronger nation economically or a $5 trillion economy will be a real hard task. Your views, Suresh Bhai?
No, I fully agree with you. As I said, then we want to really think about capturing the global market, which we were discussing earlier. We have to strong locally first, and that strong locally will happen by addressing some of the issues. And unless we are competitive in your Indian market, we can not be competitive global market. But to make sure that we are competitive in Indian market, we'll have to have the global benchmark to decide that. And to do that, as you correctly said, certain things will have to be done by the industry. Many things will have to be done by the government, because to remove this all unproductive, unnecessarily, ridiculously even enforced regulation. So I think I fully agree with you, and I know you, and of course you have been. I really admire one thing about you is that despite all the challenges, you have been so successful. So I always tell people, just imagine our industrialists, our entrepreneurs are successful despite the challenges. Can you imagine what would have happened if there are no such challenges like this? So why we put this hurdles race to them? That in hurdles race, in Indian industrialists will always win the world global medals because hurdles are. But just imagine if you remove those hurdles, how much more they can do because their unproductive energy, which is channelized into meeting such unnecessary regulations, can be addressed. So I fully take your point. Let us work together because this is an ongoing process. I am sure we'll succeed because we have removed some, but we need to remove many more. We'll work on that. And one thing I'll tell you, Prime Minister Modi has been repeatedly saying this, and I know his full commitment that he really wants to reduce this regulation. We feel that they are unnecessarily unproductive. So I think we'll work on that together and address these issues together.
Thank you, sir. You've always been a very kind friend of industry. So nice of you to make those remarks. If you don't mind, I will request just time for two more questions. The number of
my only
that I'm
issue is
getting.
I have to leave at 8:15 for other program. That's why please. So
just two more questions. I think Hari and followed by.
We can take together.
Followed by Srikanth Somani, and then we will wind up.
Thank you, sir. So thank you, Minister, sir, for interacting with us and talking in detail about how G20 countries collaborate. Sir, my question is regarding the free trade agreement which India needs to have with its trading partners, especially where there's a lot of textile trade in countries in Europe and the USA in particular. So we are actually losing a lot in terms of our price competition because countries such as Bangladesh, Vietnam, and Cambodia enjoy the FTA with their trading partners, especially for textile garments in those countries. So I think India definitely needs an FTA in textiles, sir. So I just wanted to get your view on that. And the next would be the least developed countries. They enjoy a lot of the export subsidies which the WTO recommends. But India is also losing on that front because we are not able to get a lot of those export benefits. So it is on both the ends we are losing. So I just wanted to have your views on that, sir, on FTA for textiles. Thank you.
We can take one more question and I'll answer together so that.
Srikanth?
Yeah, thanks, Suresh. First of all, so Suresh Prabhuji, it's meeting you after a long time, and I must say your articulation is always music to the ears. Thank you. Ambassador Mohan outlined some very pertinent points with regard to what India needs in terms of competitiveness, industrial policies, FTAs with Africa and the nearby nations. I also believe, sir, that in this the trade wars and the alignment which is going to take place, global alignment, I think, to my mind, I think that the polarization, regional polarization becomes stronger. And therefore, India needs to be in those FTAs, etc. But having said that, you mentioned very clearly about strong local economies, strong companies need collaboration. I completely agree in supply chain. So don't you think today the industrial policy that we are talking of and the trade policy cannot be generic? They need to be tailor-made for the product that we're going to manufacture and for the trade policies, the countries that we're going to attack. I think this is something I would like to know whether you would advocate on such a policy where we look at those products which have the potential for global supply chain and industrial policies for those, and those products which have to be strong in the Indian market as a supplement to import, have an industrial policy for those. And similarly for countries, for Africa, we have a different trade, for countries in Africa and product, we have a different trade policy, and so on and so forth. I'd like to know whether you advocate for this.
Okay, let me briefly address Mr. Hari's question first. This is mainly to Ambassador, right? Mr. You answered to Mr. Ambassador. So you asked this to Ambassador, these points, right?
For me?
Yeah, no, you want Ambassador to reply. No, so I will reply to Hari, then Ambassador can reply. So, Mr. Hari, you mentioned about 2 points. One is the disadvantages Indian businesses enjoy vis-a-vis some of our trade competitors like Vietnam, Bangladesh, and others because of the FTA. I think that is a very important issue to neutralize that disadvantage Indian businessmen faces by taking appropriate measures. I'll give an example. This was brought to me by some of the spices exporters, and they were facing big problems because the spices that were imported in India was causing a huge problem to the domestic market. So we addressed it in a very imaginative way. I don't want to expand it today, but we addressed it and the industry, they will tell you how well it worked out. On textiles, of course, this is a very important point that we have lost out a big market share to countries like Bangladesh because of certain issues historically happening. But point is very well taken. Third point on subsidies, I think we have to, in India, I always used to tell my colleagues, we should not call it subsidy anymore. It's a neutralization of additional cost that our industry has to bear because of certain structural issues, on which industry can do nothing about. And therefore, we have to help industry to get over those in disadvantages. Therefore, I think we can work on that. But I think your both points are well taken. You are a man, not with a hurry, but you are really put it on a right perspective. I fully agree. I think
Thank you, sir.